Hi, welcome to this week of Data Analysis to the Max. In previous weeks, we have looked at how to calculate with formulas and how to operate calculations based on conditions. But this week, we're going to look into lookup functions, how to combine data from this part of your spreadsheet and that part of your spreadsheet and correctly put it together. And VLOOKUP functions are very, very popular. You could say they are like the Taylor Swift of Excel formulas. Lookup functions are used in the top 5 of most used Excel functions, and this is why it's very important to know how to use them and when to use them. So let's look at this week's example. Imagine you are running a hardware store. So here you have information that you export from your register. You can see what item code you have sold, when you've sold it, and for what price. And on top of that register data, we're going to do some analysis. We want to know what items have we sold. So you can see here the codes, the associated names, the price we sell it for, the price we bought it for, the margin, which is the difference between those two prices, and the margin expressed in percentages. So for this data, we want to do some analysis. More specifically, we want to know what turnover do we make for each of the items that we sell. So we could do that like this, where we have the codes and the names, and then from the product info sheet, we directly link what the selling price is. And then with a COUNTIF function, we can look at the actual register data. We can see how many items have we sold of this particular type. And if we multiply the number of times we have sold a certain item with the price that we sell it for, then we get the turnover per product that we need. There we have it. We have calculated the turnover per product. So the first thing that you see that's a little bit strange about this formula is that Excel inputs a link to this worksheet into the formula. That happens because while we were building the formula, we moved to a different worksheet and back, but of course that's not what we want. So let's first get rid of that prefix, just remove it because it's not necessary. It just makes our spreadsheet more complex than is needed. So the question is now, is our spreadsheet now perfect? Are we in the perfect state? And maybe you have encountered this problem before, and maybe you know why this is a problem. If you don't, let me take you through what's problematic about organizing your spreadsheet in this way. So to show you this, we're going to select all data in our worksheet, copy-paste it into a fresh worksheet, and we're going to copy-paste it as values, just so you can see what the original values was, because maybe some things are going to change if I mess up my spreadsheet. So just to be sure, we make a copy of the original data. Now let's go back to our product info worksheet and do something very innocent. We're just going to sort our product info worksheet, sort it based on the selling price. You can think, well, sorting something is never going to mess up my worksheet. However, if we look now at the turnover per product, we see that our bench is suddenly worth only 10 euros, where previously it was worth 2.50. And this is because, as you can see here, the links are still pointing at the original values. And even though we have sorted them, the links haven't changed. So we're pointing directly at the wrong value. So what you should remember from this example is that if you make a link over a worksheet, it doesn't get sorted if you sort that worksheet with, you see the result here, potential for error. So this is exactly the scenario where instead of a direct link, we want to use a lookup function. You'll see that in the next video. Welcome back. In the previous video, we've looked at reasons why you want to use lookup functions, and that was because direct links in spreadsheets are going to be messed up if you change your data on the other side, for example, by sorting. And I really hope you have this ingrained into your spreadsheet brain, that if you see a formula like this, if you see a direct link in your own worksheets or in a spreadsheet that your colleague has made, for example, try to think, is this really the best way to organize my spreadsheet? Am I really sure that that C2 is going to contain the same value if I look at this spreadsheet tomorrow? So what can we do about this? We can use lookup functions, and those will be explained in this week's videos. But first, let's take a step back and not talk about spreadsheets for like 1 minute. What actually does it mean if you're looking up a value? Let's look at that outside of the spreadsheet context in, well, the canonical example of looking something up, a phone book. What are the 3 ingredients that you use if you look something up in a phone book? Well, first of all, you have a value that you're looking for. In this case, the name Bauer. That's what we're looking up. The second ingredient is what are we looking in? In this case, the phone book of namesandnumbers.com. And the third ingredient isn't actually that obvious. The third ingredient of searching is what am I going to return? In this example, we're returning the town in which Bauer lives. And these 3 ingredients are also occurring in lookup functions in a spreadsheet. So let's look at how that looks. We use a formula here. First of all, we're going to get rid of those direct links. We will select them and just say right-click, clear contents. We don't want to see those direct links again. Now we have room to input our new formula, the VLOOKUP. So we just type VLOOKUP in our formula. And then we input the 3 ingredients for looking up. First of all, what are we looking for? That's the code. Second, what are we looking in? The product info worksheet. And third of all, what are we going to return? The third column of the product info worksheet. And now you see we have the associated price with the bench, in this case, the B809 product code. So, quick question, is this formula perfect? Apart from whether or not you know the VLOOKUP function, can you spot what actually is wrong with this formula? I will give you 5 seconds to think about it. It's not perfect, right? You know that, because I forgot the dollar signs. If I draw this formula down now, you'll see that the links get messed up because I didn't input the dollar sign. So let's fix that first. Just delete the original reference and add the dollar signs. By the way, you don't have to do it manually as I do here. What you can also do is select the reference and hit F4, and then the dollars will be inputted for you. So we drag this formula down, and now you can see it is perfect. We're looking up the right values. So maybe you missed what I did here because it went a little bit quickly. Let's take a step back and do all the things step for step. All the lookup ingredients point exactly at what they are. So remember the 3 ingredients. What are we looking for? What are we looking in? And what are we going to return? You see that they occur in the VLOOKUP function as well. The first part is, what am I looking for? This is the code. The second part is, what am I looking in? It's this part of the product info worksheet. And the final argument, I would say, is the most tricky because it's just a number. It doesn't really look spreadsheety with a reference. And it actually means what number of column am I going to return? So in this case it's 3, which means I'm returning the 3rd column of the whole range that I have selected. And then you see, with this we obtain the selling price for each of the codes. We can do the exact same thing if we also want to look up the names associated with a certain code. The only thing we have to change is, in case of the names, we're looking for the 2nd column to return. So the rest of the formula is the same. We're looking for the same value in the same range. We're only returning a different value. And with that, we have made a perfect connection between 2 worksheets based on the codes that occur in both of them. In the next video, we're going to look at the mysterious 4th parameter of the lookup function that I have not yet used in this video. See you there! Hi, welcome back. In the previous video, we looked at how to use the VLOOKUP, but we didn't yet look at the 4th parameter as I promised you. So in this case, we only use 3 parameters: what to look, where to find it, and what to return. But there is still room for a 4th parameter, and maybe if you did the exercises in between, you saw that if you add an additional comma, then Excel is going to make suggestions for that 4th parameter. Let's have a look at how that looks like. You click, you add a comma, and then Excel says, hey, I have these 2 choices for you. Either you use true, which is an approximate match. It's going to give you more or less what you're searching for. Or alternatively, we can use false, which is going to give you an exact match, exactly what you're looking for. I would say this is only a little bit helpful. So let's try to see the difference in our example worksheet by putting false into one of the columns. Let's say we put false into the selling price, and we're going to put true into the lookup of the name. Now we have side by side the true and the false version of the VLOOKUP, and that will allow us nicely to see what the exact difference is between the different versions of the fourth parameter. So imagine we're in this scenario. One of your colleagues comes into your office and he says, hey, I noticed you've been doing this cool analysis of what turnover we make for what product, but I would like to know what turnover do we make for my favorite product, X098. Can you calculate that with your spreadsheet? Of course, you can do that with your spreadsheet. So again, we have true in the one column and false in the other, and now we're going to input X098, take the formulas that we have and drag it down. Now you can see what the difference is, because in column C, in the selling price, we have a NA, not found. Excel says, hey, that X098, I can't find it, whereas in the B column, Excel can still not find it, but he says, yes, the closest I can find is the fountain, because alphabetically the H is closest to the X, so it just returns whatever value is closest. So I guess from this you can understand what value you usually want. You want to use false, because if you have false, then you get a warning sign if a value that you have searched for has not been found. So remember this, if you're using a VLOOKUP to couple two worksheets together, you're usually going to want to use false. This is like the basic setting, because if you use false, you get a warning if your result isn't found. Unfortunately, false is not the default setting. If I remove the parameter and restore my formulas as they originally were, you see that the behavior of the formulas is like when I input true. It always tries to find an approximate match. This is a bit unfortunate, but yeah, this is the decision that was made by the Excel team. Probably they didn't really guess that connecting of worksheets was going to be the way that people use the VLOOKUP mostly. So we have to remember ourselves to put in false as the preferred setting. It is unfortunately not the default. Don't forget it, because forgetting to add false is one of the reasons of many spreadsheet errors. Hi, welcome back. In the previous video, I explained you that usually if you want to use the VLOOKUP function, you're going to want to use false as the last parameter, because you want to be warned if a certain value isn't found when integrating two worksheets. However, there are scenarios though where true is the good choice, and in this video I will explain you when you have to use true. So, for instance, when we're doing this analysis. In this new worksheet I've created, we're going to have a detailed look into the use of margins. So for instance, you had a talk with your sales director and he said, hey, I would like to know for what product we have a good margin and for what other products our margin could be increased maybe. So first of all, for each code, we're going to look up the margin. And this is still just an old-fashioned VLOOKUP with a false, where we're going to the product info and we're returning the sixth column, which is the margin. We change it, again, don't forget the dollar signs, it's really important that you remember that. And then you drag the formula down and you have all the margins. Now we want to do the analysis on top of it. So we want to know, is this a good margin or a bad margin? We can input a formula. For that, a simple conditional formula that we talked about in previous videos. We just say, if our margin is, let's say, smaller than 20%, then it's bad. In the alternative case, if it's bigger than 20%, but still smaller than 30, we're going to say the margin is okay. And in other cases, if it's above 30, then we're going to say, yes, our margin on this product is good. So yes, we can do this with a conditional formula. Just drag the formula down, and we have it. There's nothing wrong with it, but we are nesting conditions here, and you should remember from previous videos that if you're nesting a lot of conditionals, then a formula can get complicated. You might not expect it, but this is actually a very good scenario to use a VLOOKUP. It's really different from looking up values over two tables, but actually the VLOOKUP applies here. And let me show you how. What we can do here is add a table in our worksheet where we add the classification. So we say for a margin of everything above 0, the classification is going to be bad. Everything between 0 and 20 is going to be okay. And everything above 20, between 20 and 30, is going to be good. The exact same classification as we just put into the conditional formula. Now we can get rid of the whole if, the nested if that we didn't really like, and put a VLOOKUP there. We're going to look for the value of the margin in this new margin table. We're returning the second column, and then we're going to add true. Because we don't want to look for 22, we know 22 is not in the table, we want to look for the closest margin that there is to 22. And you see that the functionality of this VLOOKUP is exactly the same as the functionality of the if. And doing it this way, you can see it's very easy, because if I want to change something in my table, you just saw me change OK into uppercase OK. I can just do that in the table. I don't need to change the formulas. I just change my table and all the formulas are updated. Even more so, if I want to add another classification, like 40% is the best margin there is, I can just add it to my table, update the lookup table, and then my condition is updated. Whereas if should I do that with an if, then I would have gotten another branch of the if, and my formula would get longer and longer and longer. And with this VLOOKUP solution, it doesn't matter how many classifications I have. If I have 100, this formula will still be one VLOOKUP. Whereas if I have 100 classifications in a conditional formula, then I will have 100 if, or actually I would have 99 ifs, but that would still be a lot. So, if you are classifying things, if you're dividing a certain value into different categories using an if, then I hope you remember this scenario. You could use a VLOOKUP with true to substantially simplify your formulas in such a scenario. Hi! In previous videos, we looked at the use of VLOOKUP, when to use it, and specifically when to use the true and false parameters. Unfortunately, there's also trouble in paradise. The VLOOKUP function isn't always perfect. And in this video, I'm going to show you 2 reasons when you're not going to want to use the VLOOKUP. So, if we're in a little hardware shop where we're only selling 7 different items, using a VLOOKUP is definitely fine. There's no problem at all. But suppose we're running a huge hardware store with like 6,000 different items. Then our nice little VLOOKUP function that you see here, if I drag it down now, will take a long time. You see, calculating 1 Mississippi, yep, there it is. It's pretty slow. And it would be okay if it would only be slow if I'm calculating the VLOOKUP function, but the spreadsheet will now remain slow because the VLOOKUPs will be calculated all the time. For instance, probably you've noticed my typo here. I'm not selling a clam hammer, I'm selling a claw hammer. So if I'm changing that small typo, again, everything has to be recalculated. So using a lot, like 6,000 VLOOKUPs in the spreadsheet, is going to make my spreadsheet slow for every operation that I have. So the first reason VLOOKUPs can be cumbersome is they're pretty slow for large data sets. The second reason, suppose your boss comes into your office and she says, hey, I want to offer a discount today on claw hammers and rip saws, and you need to give me the associated codes because I need to put those codes into the register system for the discounts. And you're like, oh, I know how to do that. I've been following this super cool online Excel course. I can do it. I'll just put in the names. That's easy. The claw hammer and the rip saw. I will type them up. No problem. And I'll just use a VLOOKUP to look up the codes that go with a name. VLOOKUP, I know how to do it. Look up the name, go to the information sheet. Oh, what column do I send back? -1. I want to have a value that's back in the stream. Unfortunately, there's no such thing as a -1 column in a VLOOKUP. The only way you can use a VLOOKUP is this way, from the first column and retrieve something that's in a later column. There's no way that you can go back in the stream with a VLOOKUP function. It only works one way. So these are two reasons that VLOOKUP functions aren't perfect. If you want to have speed, or if you want to have a two-way street, you want to look up in both directions, then unfortunately a VLOOKUP function is not the right function. There's also good news. In the next video I will show you what functions to use as an alternative if you're in one of those two scenarios. See you there! Hi! In the previous video I told you about two scenarios in which a VLOOKUP function is not the perfect solution. First, if you need speed, and second, if you want to have lookups that go backstream, the strange direction for a VLOOKUP. So in this video I'm going to show you how to resolve that situation, where I'm going to teach you two new methods to solve this. But first, let's take a step back, let's take our time machine and go back to the second video in which I talked about what the exact ingredients are for a lookup function. It was what am I going to look for, where am I looking in up, and what am I going to return. Those three ingredients occur in the VLOOKUP function. For our new implementation, using two new functions, we're going to split those two parts. So we use one function for finding a value and one function for returning a value. And for finding a value, we're going to use the match function. And here in this video, I will show you how it works. So we type in match, we use the match function, we input what are we going to look for, and the second parameter is where am I going to find it. The third parameter is very similar to the fourth parameter of the VLOOKUP, where I can say I want to have a value that's higher, exact value, or lower. And we pick the exact value here, much like the false option in a VLOOKUP. So you see, claw hammer A0 is on the second line. It's not that impressive, so let me sort the product info worksheet so that you can see exactly how the match works. So we've sorted it now. A0 is now on the sixth line, and our match function indeed returns A0 code is on row 6. That's what the match function does. For a given range, it tells you on what row a given value is. So we have the first part of our new scenario covered. What about the second part? For the second part, we're going to use the index function, and an index function is going to return us, in a given range, this specific row and column. So here you can see how it looks. Again, we know that A0 is on the sixth row, but we want to have the name instead of the code. So we go back to our original formula. We remove the match. We just put it Ctrl X on the clipboard. We put in the index. What are we going to return? We're going to return the B column. That's the first parameter. What are we going to return? What row? Well, we know the row where we have just found our value. And what column? Well, B is only one column, so we're just inputting 1 there. So now you see we have the name associated with the value, the line number on which we have just matched. And as you see me double click and run this index match function for the entire, all the thousands of lines. You see the first benefit, speed. It's really a lot quicker. But using index match over the VLOOKUP has another benefit. Yeah, you remember this scenario where a boss comes in and says, hey, I want to have these codes associated with these products because I want to enter them in the register because I want to enter a discount. We can solve this problem now. We tried it with a VLOOKUP with the -1. Let's get rid of that and let's use an index match here as well. I like to start with the match part because it's easier to debug, it's easier to see what is being matched if it doesn't work. So let's match. We are going to look for the name in the B column and return the exact match. There it is. We know this by now. The claw hammer is on the 6th line. So we remove the match. We just cut it for a while. Now we input the index. What are we going to return? Codes. What row do we want to return? Well, we know this. We could have entered 6 because we know the line, but we enter the match function there, and it's only one column, so we use 1. So you see, the second benefit of using an index match over a VLOOKUP is going backstream. It doesn't matter what we want to return. In this case, we want to return our next door neighbor, but we can do anything. The index match is very flexible. We could also return, if we have a match here, return the cell below it or the cell 3 to the right and 1 up top. It doesn't matter. The index match lets you return anything you want. So for some scenarios, index match is better than VLOOKUP. See you next week.